Hey, it's Superman here with Core TCG, and of course, Hidden Arsenal's out, and Lord of Tachyon Galaxy is going to come out, so I'm here to cover a few rulings on things that might come up in the future on cards relevant to Hidden Arsenal and Tachyon. So let's begin. First we have Drago saac. A lot of people have been asking this. If you have Drago saac and then 2 tokens in the field and someone goes Dark Hole, what happens? Well, we have other rulings that we can take from in order to make sense of this. It's just like Field Barrier versus Heavy Storm. If you have Field Barrier on the field with a field spell and Heavy Storm is activated, on the destruction of Field Barrier, it's still on the field to protect the other card because they're trying to be destroyed at the same time, and since they're trying to be destroyed at the same time, that card is on the field to protect the other one and then is sent to grave. So just like that, the Drago saac tokens will be removed from the field and protect the Drago saac. Also remember that Drago saac can tribute any mecha-phantom beast monster. It doesn't have to be a token. So that includes itself. So if in any instance, if your opponent has skill drain on the field, it can tribute itself to get rid of that skill drain, to get around the fact that skill drain only affects face-up monsters since it tributes itself as a cost, and then destroys the skill drain since it's no longer field for that effect to apply to it. Also, I'm going to cover a few cards, not per se rulings. For instance, we have Trifortress Tot, which is a card that has been recently announced in the Tachyon set. What happens is it's a 2800 defense monster. It's just pretty much a defense wall, and you can special summon it after your opponent special summons 3 monsters. It's unaffected by effects. So when your opponent starts spamming his elemental dragons, and he goes 2 elemental dragons into Drago saac, you can drop it, and then the Drago saac can't get over this. The weakness of this card is it only lasts a turn. It's kind of redundant. You'd think that you would just want to play something like Swift Scarecrow over it, because it accomplishes the same means, because remember, its defense goes down, so it can be run over on the next turn. So Swift Scarecrow is kind of just a better option, because it doesn't leave a monster on the field, but you don't have to wait for your opponent to have to summon 3 things in order to activate it. Also, any dragon player, which they should be, could be running Red Dragon Archfiend in the extra deck, because they have Triple Veiler and the Tech Flamvell Guard and or Dragoonity Corseska to make an easy 8 and just run it over with the 3000 attack beater. So I don't think it's that great of a card, but it is something that has been presented in the set for us as a sort of answer to Elemental Dragons. I'm not sure, but it's there, and some people might want to play it. And speaking of Elemental Dragons, we have Elemental Dragons in the end phase with Return from a Different Dimension. Return is a really good card in the deck, even if you're not really playing a trap lineup, because yeah, it's MST bait, but the thing is, you can chain it, and then you bring back all of your Elemental Dragons from the RFG. You can either return them back to your hand on the end phase, or have Return from Different Dimension banish them. Remember, on the end phase, you get to choose which effect resolves first, so as you see fit, you can have them return back, or have them banished to add different cards to your hand. So that's really cool to know. Also, be 100% certain you're keeping proper track of the Elemental Dragon effects, whether you be the person playing them or the opponent, because it's quite common to lose track of all of these effects, which remember, all of them can only be activated once per turn. That includes the minis, so if your opponent starts going off and you're not keeping track of it, they could accidentally summon another monster that has already used its effect that turn, like another Tempest twice or something like that. So make sure that you're watching what's going on, because it's actually quite easy to lose track of it, since there's 4 different monsters that each can only be activated once, on top of there also being the baby. Also, Justice of Prophecy has been reworded. This is completely relevant to the fact that we're going to see even more Prophecy play in Tachyon. Now it's been reworded, and its errata says that it's only on your end phase you can activate its effect. So if you activate Divine Judgment on your opponent's turn to kind of stop them from doing their judgment and also get your plus, you can't bring out Justice on their end phase and then try to activate her effect on top of that. Another thing important to remember with Prophecy decks is the relevance of Spellbook of Power versus the Mermail matchup. Now, if you guys don't already know this, when you activate Spellbook of Power and you increase a monster's attack by 1000, that's not the only part of the effect that will activate. Once it goes to the graveyard and that monster that's attached to it destroys something by battle, that Spellbook of Power that's already in the grave will start a new chain. So what this means is if you put Spellbook of Power on something like Justice of Prophecy, put her at 2600 attack, and attack into something like Mermail Abysslinde, Abysslinde would start a new chain with Spellbook of Power. Now remember, as turn player, you always get your mandatory effects before your opponent on the chain. Also, Abysslinde is an optional effect on top of that, so remember, your Spellbook of Power will always be Chain Link 1, and Abysslinde's optional if you can effect will be Chain Link 2. Now what happens is, Abysslinde searches, brings out her monster, and then after that monster's summoned, you have to finish resolving Chain Link 1, which is adding a Spellbook card to your hand. Because of this, cards like Mermail, Abyss Pike, Mistiming. Because Abyss Pike's effect is an optional when you can effect, its summon has to be the last thing to occur in the game state for you to be able to manually activate it. And because Chainlink 1 still has to resolve and add a spellbook to hand, you can't. It's the same as trying to bring out an Abyss Pike on Chainlink 2 or higher using a Call of the Haunted or an Abyss Spear. It just doesn't work. So this is something really important to know in this matchup because it's slightly obscure, but also something that could completely change the outcome of the match, knowing this information. Also, Big Eye, which is another thing we're going to see a lot in Prophecies and Dragons. Remember that if its effect gets effect failured, its effect was negated, but not the activation, so it still cannot declare an attack when it tries to activate its effect, and it's negated by something like Skill Drain or Valor. Another thing is Evil Swarms. Now, when I was playing very actively in 2009, then started playing even more in 2010, Extreme Victory came out, and there was this card called Dodger Dragon that came out. And if you don't know what Dodger Dragon does, it's a 4-star wind dragon type. When it's normal summoned, during the turn it's normal summoned, your opponent cannot activate counter traps. Now, what relevance does this have to do with Evil Swarms? Well, we're seeing Evil Swarm Caster and also Constellar Pollux in Hidden Arsenal 7, and they are worded in very similar ways, and they work just like Dodger Dragon. And of course, you know, it says when this card is normal summoned, you can perform another additional normal summon that turn. That is not an effect that activates. That's not a trigger effect or an ignition effect. It is a continuous effect. So the moment that monster touches the field, it's applied. Think of it kind of like Jinzo. You know, when you summon a Jinzo, your opponent can't chain Bottomless Trap Hole to it because its effect was already applied. It doesn't start a chain, so there's no window of opportunity to be able to activate a trap like that. And remember, I'm talking about the successful summon, so you can obviously activate something like Solemn Warning or Judgment and stop it. Now, the difference between effects like Vanity's Fiend and Jinzo to Dodger Dragon and Constellar Pollux is these effects create sort of conditions, so to speak, on the field. So let's say your opponent summons Jinzo, you activate Effect Valor. So now you can activate traps that turn. Now, if you were to summon something like Dodger Dragon or Constellar Pollux and your opponent were to chain Effect Valor to it, its effect was already applied the moment it touched the field. It doesn't matter. There's no window of opportunity because it doesn't start a chain, it's a continuous effect, and it creates a condition for the player to be able to summon again. Now, the one difference is if there's something already face up on the field, like Skill Drain, before the monster was summoned, then when it touches the field, its effect was already immediately negated, and then you can't do the extra normal summon. But remember, if it's something that's happening in response to the successful summon, where it's already on the field and already successfully touched the field, like chaining Skill Drain in response to its summon, or chaining Effect Valor in response to its summon, then remember, you can get that extra normal summon, and those cards do not stop it. Now, quick cap on one last thing. In Europe news, a lot of people have been talking about this, and I don't blame them. A 53-card Mermail deck won the event. If you guys want to see a really interesting analysis and explanation that Jason Meyer wrote on it, check out the description box below. He wrote up an article on the deck, and the article is quite insightful on exactly how and why this happened. And with that being said, this week's coupon code is going to be Core Mermail. You can enter this upon checkout when you're buying Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles for a 10% return in all those singles back to you in store credit. Also, you guys can check out our Facebook page. We have giveaways all the time, and right now we're giving away a box of Hidden Arsenal 7, so if you guys want a chance at that, check it out. We're also going to have a Tachyon giveaway really, really soon. I hope this video's helped. As always, it's been a pleasure. Take care.